Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our third of 5 sessions on the theme of Warriors Cry for Peace. This is the week of 9/11. 22 years ago, the World Trade Towers were savaged by imploding aircraft in an event that reverberated around the world. We talked about that yesterday from the vantage point of a woman who was in Iraq, which, as you all know, the United States proceeded to invade, causing more damage and destruction than anything that happened at 9/11 itself. And she's in her own life path has ended up in the United States and spoke very passionately about the reality that we're all one. We all feel the same things. We all yearn for the same things, and that there's no need for the kind of conflict and destruction that we saw on 9/11 and its aftermath for the next 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. Today, Stephanie Mines, who's our convener, is going to open a dialogue with Cynde and Joe Collins, a mother and son, a son who also responded to the events of 9/11 and joined the Army, ended up in Iraq, and came back a veteran. And out of that experience has formed together with his mother and others an association of veterans so that they can draw comfort and nurturance from each other and seek to overcome the abuse of war that they personally suffered. Before we go to that, I want to also just touch on the pre-session dialogue yesterday with Spurred and her course coming up starting tomorrow. I'll put the link in the chat. For those of you watching passively on YouTube or Facebook, you can go to ubiquityuniversity.org and go to our courses and look for the live online tab, and you'll find listed a Spurred course on time and perception, past lives, and how do we increase our frequencies, our intuitive and extrasensory perception, so that we can become more aware of the non-human intelligences around us, both past and present, both historic and also galactic. That's all available to each and every one of us. But we've become so dumbed down in our modernity and so reliant on our cell phones and computers and various aspects of our technology that our own intuitive extrasensory perceptions are getting lower and lower and lower as we become increasingly reliant on technology. But in order for us to really commune with extraterrestrials, to commune with nature, we have to elevate and refine our capacities and innate capacities and faculties, which we see in the animal world all around us. Their extraordinary capacity for psychic clairvoyance and communication. So I want to encourage all of us that are interested in participating in humanity's extraterrestrial moment to make that course available to you, which starts tomorrow. It's our hope that over time we can build our muscle tissue collectively. Myself, most of all, as I prepare to go back to Washington, D.C., and to be in the thick of the U.S. government's disclosure to the world public over the next 7 years, starting on January 1, 2024, that we are not alone, and that extraterrestrial intelligences have been on planet Earth there's been sustained contact, and the government is going to be providing evidence to that effect. So this is a very important issue for us all. So thank you, everyone. Let us now turn to the theme of the week, Veterans Cry for Peace, and I welcome Stephanie Mines, who's convening the 5-day program.
Welcome, everyone, to the series Warriors Cry for Peace. I'm Stephanie Mines. I am here today with Cynde Collins-Clark and Joe Collins, and I want to identify them as my dear friends, as well as my colleagues in this effort to reveal the truth of what happens when war comes home. Cynde and Joe are on the cover of my book, They Were Families, War Comes Home. And it is its own beautiful story that I will just allude to here that brought me into their lives when I was in the heartland of America, Oklahoma. And Joe was scheduled to come and see me. And out of that, what unfolded from that appointment was the creation, really, the sisterhood of Cynde and I as daughters of veterans, as someone who was living the truth of what happens when war comes home. Our alliance led to, ultimately, Veterans Families United, an organization that is of service to all veterans, to all of their families, and to anyone who wants to be of service in meeting the needs of veterans and their families. So, as I've mentioned in other programs, this one is very stimulating. It intends, actually, to evoke the awareness that all of us are carrying the intergenerational transmission of what happens when war comes home. And because that will be evoked, I want to be sure that everyone is well-resourced, self-regulating, grounded, feeling your connection to the earth, feeling your connection with yourself, and feeling aligned. And that word alignment is going to resonate through this program because the entire program is about alignment. Cynde and Joe and I were just discussing that there is a very misaligned understanding of what war is, what enlistment is, and what happens when war comes home. So this entire program today is about coming into alignment. And I've demonstrated in other programs this gesture of alignment. It's called Prayer Inju, and it brings you into alignment. And it is a hand posture that's familiar to many from prayer and also from yoga. It's a way that we bring all the energy channels of the body together. And I'm going to suggest another way of grounding, which is through the cranium. So the misalignment is a misunderstanding that has residual neurochemical impact. And so we can just place the palm of one hand at the base of the cranium and the palm of the other hand across the forehead. So in all the places where your hands are very naturally falling at either of the lateral aspects of the cranium, at the base, and also at the lateral aspects of the forehead, these sites themselves are what are aspects of what my teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, called the pillars of the brain. So just place your hands in these positions. It doesn't matter which side is at the base of the cranium, which hand is over the forehead, whichever comes naturally to you. And the touch is very light. And see if you can tune in to how your hands are actually bringing these parts of your cranium into relationship with each other. You may sense through your light touch a reorganization of structures, a fascial rearrangement. So noticing the breath, allowing the breath to deepen your sensitivity, your sensory awareness, allowing these structures to realign, to detoxify, to clear your mind. Letting your out breath dominate, feeling your rootedness in the earth. And then once again, bringing the palms of the hands together, all the pads of all the fingers touching. Close your eyes once more. Place this inju or mudra or hand posture, this prayer position at the heart level. The brain and the heart derive from the same connective tissue, the same cellular structures. And feeling that alignment, we will come into this circle of healing. And we'll begin by hearing from Joe Collins, and then we'll hear from his mom, Cynde Collins-Clark, who will tell you the truth about what happens when work comes home. Yes, go over to you, Cynde and Joe.
Okay, well, I'm gonna, in a nutshell, just kind of go through some of my experiences. I joined pre 9/11 only by a few months. I was in delayed entry, which means I joined the Army during my senior year of high school. And within a week of graduating high school, went off to basic training in AIT. And it was actually during my active duty training during AIT that the 9/11 attacks had happened. And I remember when they happened, I mean, everybody was in shock, obviously. Something like that was something I had never expected to happen. If I'm being completely honest, I joined for a multitude of different reasons. College money was probably the primary one. My grandfather was a service member, served honorably years ago. So I did have, a lot of patriotism in my family. But I didn't expect a conflict to happen. I mean, it was like the last thing I expected. I knew that the Gulf War had happened previously, but it was one of those things that was, kind of swept under the rug after, I don't know, a 6-month ordeal. And so I didn't think I was really at any risk of anything, but obviously 9/11 happened, shocked everyone. And I kind of dug deep when it did. And I came back from all of my training, tried to go to school, was kind of all over the place, felt a little directionless, didn't really feel like school was a good fit for me. And immediately started remembering, my active duty time in the service and how it grounded me. It gave me this structure and this direction. And I think I kind of grabbed onto that, like this is an opportunity not just to kind of start my life, but here is this opportunity with this conflict, this horrible thing that had happened, where I can go and serve, and it will mold me and shape me into the person that I may be meant to be. And while I'm there, I can do good, and I can contribute. I had a lot of noble reasons going on in my head of what I thought was really going to happen compared to what really did happen. So it happened quick. I mean, like me deciding to volunteer actually and getting grabbed by a unit and getting picked up. I got picked up by the 4th Infantry Division back in 2003, which was the first wave, Operation Iraq Freedom. It happened, I mean, almost overnight. I got a phone call on a Friday night. They said, if you want to come with this unit who's with the 4th Infantry Division, we need to know in the morning. And I literally spent all night staying awake, packing my gear, and my parents woke up and I said, I'm going. I'm sorry, there's no stopping it. The train is in motion and it's left the station. And I stayed committed. I stayed committed throughout the entire thing. But I will say that mentally what I had expected in preparation for what I was going to be exposed to was so far less severe than what actually happened. I've said repeatedly to numerous people that it was such a shock, the extreme nature of everything, the situations that we were put into, what I felt like was grossly being underprepared. I felt like the levels of stress and the amount of work put on everybody involved was so over the top. We were just literally burning people out left and right, frying people's nervous systems. And again, I was 18 years old when all this happened. I was deploying with a lot of younger guys. There was only one person in my unit younger than me. The majority were early to mid 20s, if not older than that. And so I've used the analogy, it was probably as close to hell as I could picture it, my entire deployment. And here I am with these people that I've trained with, that I care about. A lot of them had families of their own. And, you know, we're just, you go into survival mode. The minute you get there, it's like your body just is so pumped with adrenaline, and you are just in that fight or flight mode that you're just reacting to everything. You don't slow down enough to actually contemplate, you know, what you're going to do or how you're going to do it. You're literally just going from A to B to C to D without any thought, and it creates this pattern of behaving that doesn't just go away. And conditions like that, they don't get better. They actually got worse. People became more hostile as incidents happened. People became more on edge. And it was just like this massive unfolding mentally of it was like a long duration aimed project of trying to create as many insane, unstable people as you possibly could. And here's this, a lot of these very young people, close to my age, 18, 19, 20, and we're just watching this unfold. And it's such a level of craziness that you just can't, you know, words really don't give it justice. Even to this day, I try to tell people what it's like. And I think if you weren't there, you just can't understand how insane some of the things that happen are. And there's really no closure to it. There's no making sense of it. You leave with such this disheveled, confused look where you're just like, the way I handled it, as I got on the plane to come home, and I was just thinking to myself, my God, that was the worst, most horrible, traumatic chapter of my entire life. There is nothing that will ever come close. So I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to close the book on that chapter. I'm going to pretend like it didn't happen. I'm going to go home where everything is good and my life makes sense. And I'm just not going to talk about it. I'm just going to get back to my normal daily routine, and everything it's going to be magical and okay, and I'm going to be okay, and life's going to go back to normal. And I tried that. I literally tried that. I came home, and immediately, part of me, I think deep down, knew that wasn't going to work. I remember standing on my driveway. I'll never forget this. And 7 days prior, I had been in the desert with all my gear. I was a SAW gunner, M249 gunner. So I had all this gear, all this ammo, all this stuff on me all the time. 7 days prior, standing in sand up to my ankles, to standing on my driveway with my group of childhood friends. And this, almost like this wave hit me, and it's like, you're gonna have to do some work. You can't go from that to this, and you cannot. I felt like a chess piece that had been taken off the board for so long and then thrown back on the board, and I couldn't relate to anyone. I couldn't make sense of what I had been through. I know that there are people there that were willing to listen to me, that wanted to support me, but they didn't know. That's the other thing. I wasn't at a point where I was ready to talk about it. I wanted to bury it. I wanted to hide it, and I wanted to go on with my life. And fortunately for me, the federal government had a job opportunity as a military technician very close to where I live, as a GSA, and they offered me a slot to work for the government as this mill tech, which is stuff I love doing. And I took the job, worked at it for a while, but as I stayed home, the longer I was here, the more I began to unravel. I had severe PTSD, depression problems, anxiety problems, and they just, you can't bury that. You can't ignore it. You can't run from it. The more I tried, the more it would manifest itself in unpredictable and strange ways. And it got to a point where everybody was on board knowing this was going on, but they were either afraid to confront me about it or trying to talk to each other and find a way to present the problem to me. And eventually, I use this analogy a lot. I bought a house, spent all of my money that I had saved from my deployment to purchase a home, was spending my money working for the federal government on my mortgage, and loved my job. And I felt like it was this house of cards that was loosely stacked, and sooner or later, the house of cards was going to collapse. There was nothing that could be said or done that was going to stop that from happening. But when you work that hard for something, and it's something that means so much, no one wants to face reality that everything is going to come crashing and burning down around them, and there's no way to stop it. So I kind of stayed in this denial state for as long as possible until everything just collapsed. I ended up leaving my job because of the issues that were going on. I lost my home, and just culmination of things hit. And basically it led to a very long, dark chapter of, I would say, 10 to 15 years of almost extreme isolation, major issues with depression, major issues with anxiety, where we, tried different medications, different treatment plans. For that first 10 years, hardly any progress, just this very slow creep of, looking back and realizing over, the course of 2 years, okay, I've made these little improvements, so it is getting better. But little by little, we kept at it. I was very fortunate. I had a very supporting family. I had a lot of friends that were always in my corner. I had a lot of people from my home unit that cared about me, that wanted to see me get better. So the support and the structure was there. I would have never been able to navigate any of it on my own. I think if somebody would have held a gun to my head back then and said, look, we're going to shoot you unless you can go to the VA and enroll yourself and then start seeing a counselor and psychiatrist on your own, I wouldn't have been able to do any of the paperwork, let alone probably get myself there, nor remember even what days I had appointments. I was that sick, that out of touch. And I'm fortunate my mother had a history in the counseling field, so my family was already open to an understanding of mental health and what role it can play and how severe it can get. So the support, the structure, and all that was really there and in place, which kind of allowed me as like a stepping stone or a starting point to say, okay, well, I know these people got my back, and I know that they're always going to be there for me. And as long as I just keep pushing forward little by little, and I don't give up, and I keep trying, eventually I'm going to get better. And we met with a lot of issues. I know early on in the beginning, I had a lot of physical manifestations. My resting pulse used to be 160 beats per minute all the time. I used to get splitting migraine headaches, extreme sensitivity to loud noises, bright lights. And I would talk about this stuff. I'd bring it up to psychiatrists and counselors, and it would either get minimized or, oh, that sounds like anxiety, things like that. I remember, I think it was 2 years that I saw, actually a really good psychiatrist of mine, told him about my heart. I was like, it feels like it's going to jump out of my chest. It's always going. 2 years after telling him this, he finally takes my pulse one day, and his eyes just brightened up. He's like, my God, your pulse is almost 160 beats a minute. I'm like, yeah, it feels like it's going to jump out of my chest. He goes, I thought you were talking about anxiety. This is a psychiatrist who loved the field of psychiatry, who's sitting here thinking me saying, feel like my heart's going to jump out of my chest, is an analogy for I'm anxious when I literally was saying something physically is wrong. So even somebody that cares, that understands what they're doing, there is a disconnect. I mean, he was in shock. I'll never forget his facial expression. And immediately he's like, I need you to see cardiologists and specialists. He's like, this is dangerous. You could be on the verge of a heart attack, which led to a whole other group of doctors that I had to start seeing. And so little by little, you know, we chipped at it, we kept at it. There are times that I genuinely thought that it wasn't going to get better. But I've told people numerous times, they said that there was something in me early on, and I don't know if it was more because I had dabbled in 12-step work. I had been misdiagnosed and given some medications that led to some dependency issues. And early on in my treatment, I had made this commitment. I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep moving forward at any cost. I don't care how bad it gets. I don't care if I suffer for 60 years. If I don't get better, I'm going to just keep trying. I'm going to keep going to my appointments. I'm going to keep putting my whole heart into it. I'm going to try the very best that I can to work with every doctor that I have. And if I don't get better, oh well. You know, I'm making a personal commitment to try. And, you know, I think it was a 12-step work. And maybe some of my core values that really galvanized that in me. And that got me through some really dark times. I would say that there was a good 7, 8, maybe 10 years of it where I was just surviving. I was no longer living. I was just stuck in this survival mode of going to my appointments, coming home, laying in a dark room, passing out on medications, waking up the next day and trying it again.
And this is where I'd like to interject as far as the family is concerned. And Joe did a superb job of capturing how it was leading up on his end. On my end as the observer, as the parent, as a caring counselor, was as he was initially getting sick, his work would call me and would say, you know, something feels wrong, you know, we need to speak about it. And I'd set up a time with them and they wouldn't make the time. They wouldn't show up at the appointment. So there was, again, that misalignment, Stephanie, that you had talked about, that this willingness to confront the reality of what was happening, but this disconnect and knowing how to do it, and a way to do it that was mutually supportive and helpful. So it wasn't until Joe did not show up for work for 3 days that I got a phone call at my work that said, we're worried about him, this is not him. And I immediately left my work and drove to his house. He was on, I just walked into the house, it was empty, walked back to his room, the door was closed, knocked on it, and I said, son, I think something's wrong. He's like, nah. And I knocked on it again, and I said, I think we need to go to the hospital. And he said, nah. and finally he answered the door. But again, I was reacting because I had never, it came together so quickly. So like you're talking about that craziness in war, it was a craziness on the home front of facing this different kind of battle, this battle of what's really going on, and I'm not prepared for this, and I don't have the tools for this as a civilian. So Joe did come along. What he said was really important. He was compliant. He went along, and of course he was prescribed 3 more medicines that add layer upon layer and mask some of the real issues that were going on. But the whole challenge as a family member of not being prepared, not having the right tools, having inadequate tools for communication, for transition, for recognizing how to intervene, for even knowing to whom you would ask for intervention. I remember I was told, sign them up for the VA. So I said, that's a good idea. The VA is a big building here. It's like, 6 stories. Where do you go to do? Nobody could tell me. Oh, you can do it online. Oh, I can do that. So pretty soon I've spent 8 hours being dropped off and never being able to complete the application process when I was at work, and really just wanting to throw up my hands. By this time, we had been able to get Joe home. And the only way we had been able to get Joe home is because of a command officer that Joe respected highly.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not remember this, but he went in and he actually had to crawl through Joe's bedroom window when Joe was still living in his house. And he sat down beside him and he said, "Now, Joe, I want you to do what your mom says, or I'm going to send you to the VA." So that's all it took.
Uh-huh.
So these ancillary, these people on the periphery, just doing the best they could in this maelstrom of insanity, because there was no bridge, there was no language, there was no way that we were all interconnected to support the warrior home, one who had just spent the worst year of his life that you were going to tuck away.
Mm-hmm.
And who wouldn't want to do that? But we on the other end knew no way to communicate or welcome him back in with gentleness, kindness, respect, rebalancing, realignment in a truthful way. Because as Joe has said very, very eloquently, whether it's the movies or commercials or timeless stories of the warriors who go and, you know, do the right thing, and they seem to come back and they're the heroes, you know,
That's not real.
the reality is that they're
broken,
deeply wounded,
mm-hmm.
and that nobody has addressed that. They have glorified the hero, which I am grateful for our heroes. I don't want to take anything away from that, but we have not developed a way to articulate and communicate the whole picture. And that whole picture is that it ripples out. The wounds of war ripple out. Mm-hmm. His illness, I mean, even as a counselor, I didn't know who to call. I didn't know how to connect the dots. It became, you know.
I'd say too much. You can't, I've said often, you can't basically what happens in war with the soldiers, you revved up to max all the time. Now you're told you have to overcome anything in a moment's notice. You just cannot give up. You have to keep going. And once that's created and ingrained in your mind, you can't turn it off. It's always there. So when you come home and you're messed up with a challenge, or you're trying to overcome something, this little voice that just pops in your head, and it's like, don't make such a big deal out of this. This is a small thing. You just need to do this and that, and everything will be okay. And it's always there, always whispering to you, just keep going, just push through. So you've got this person that can't slow down, that can't, you know, their nervous system's fried. Their barometer is no longer even existent. Their gauge of normal went from here to so off the charts that they don't even know where to start. And you've got all their family members and loved ones standing around saying, this isn't who left. I don't know who this is, but this isn't my son or my husband or you know, my wife. This is some stranger, and they don't know what to do. The soldier thinks they're okay or thinks they can handle it. They're trying to keep going. And, you know, it creates this problem where nobody's coming together. Nobody's addressing the core issues, the core problem. And yeah, something that I bring up a lot, you know, the movies glorify soldiers. They tell this timeless tale of, you know, the hero overcoming evil and good conquering all and all that. You see it and you think, okay, well, you know, people can do that. People aren't really built for war. They're really not. I think since war has ever existed, there are survivors. There are no winners. Anyone that gets through it is just surviving. Some of them, not even that. They're just like a comatose person that's just existing. Very, very broken people, very damaged deep to their core, which leads to just a lot of dysfunctional coping mechanisms, can lead to substance abuse problems, physical abuse problems within families. You know, again, with no barometer and no gauge to tell you what's normal anymore, what you might be thinking is a normal reaction or a normal way to handle things could look insane to other people.
Mhm.
So it's a cycle of abuse and toxic violence that just keeps going and going and going. And you've got a lot of good people, whether it's the family members, there's a lot of good people in the VA and in the systems that want to help, but there's nobody building the bridge to go from broken to a support structured system. It's like it's built out of toothpicks and duct tape. It's just, and you're building it as you're trying to cross it.
Uh-huh.
It's not there. It's not already existing. It's not quickly put in place. You're literally on the phone. And if you're a sick veteran or even a family member that's overwhelmed and you're trying to navigate, who do I call to build this next step of the bridge? Or what form do I have to fill out today to get the counselor to see my husband with severe PTSD or anxiety or who's sleeping in the closet?
Mm-hmm.
It's then you go into survival mode and everybody just is no longer operating from a good baseline. Everyone's just kind of flailing in this deep survival mode of like, how do we get from A to Z and without a map?
Joe, something that you said that is that really struck me is about the building the bridge out of toothpicks and sticks and whatever as you're trying to get across. And in 2006, I was fortunate enough to be selected as Oklahoma Mother of the Year for my work with veterans. So I asked Joe's sister, my daughter, to choose a song to sing. She has a lovely voice. And the song that she personally chose was Love Can Build the Bridge. And when we talk about this part of the program that we're a part of, Stephanie, about how do we get from this huge disconnect, from this unbuilt bridge, and what got us through. I think it ultimately, fundamentally, is this deep and profound love. This love that is demonstrated through patience, through kindness, through, even though we don't understand, even though it seems totally insane, walking with the person, hand in hand, with tenderness. And
I would also say not willing to give up too.
love doesn't give up.
Well, there's I'm not going to say it gives up, but I'm going to say that our recovery journey, even mine, had been years of attempting one treatment path and it either not working or medication not working or whatever direction we were going. And that ongoing discouragement of continually getting knocked down and putting your hopes into this new doctor is really going to heal me or help me find what's broken and guide me to a better place, or this new medication will stabilize me and everything's going to be okay. Well, when that fails 10 times in a row and you might be worse off than you were 2 years prior before you even started, it's like you're trying to drive 500 miles with a quarter of a tank of gas and you're just on fumes. And how many miles can your car keep going on a tank with just fumes in it? Eventually it's going to run out. Your loved ones, your family member, your support system, they're all running on fumes too.
Right.
And it gets to a point where you're just coasting.
Right.
Or you're pushing the car and you're just like, please God, just one more day, just one more mile. And nobody can see the finish line. Nobody can see far enough down the road to say, if we just push the car 30 more miles, it's going to be okay. We're going to get help down there and they're going to refill our tank and everything's going to be good. For all you know, you could be pushing the car indefinitely and nobody's going to come to your rescue. And that's the discouragement. I do think support and love and a willingness to never give up is like saying, okay, well, we're going to help you push that car as long as it takes, no matter what. But even then, that discouragement, that frustration, and that kind of almost broken-hearted feeling that just overwhelms people. You know, you can only get, you know, I don't know if it's Rocky. It says, life is about getting knocked down and how many times you can keep getting back up, which is true. But, you know, people can only take so much of a beating before they're just, you know, disheartened to the point where they're ghosts and they're just there existing. And that's what a lot of this stuff will do to people, not just the soldier, but the family members. And they reach a point of just existing in emptiness, and their hope fades. I've seen it. I've seen it in the eyes of people where they're hopeful and they're encouraged and they're thinking, you know, this is going to be okay. I believe it now. I think if we just stick to this path, everything's going to be okay. And you see them 4 months later, and their eyes are just empty, and there's nobody there. And you're like, you could give them the secret to life itself in that moment, and it would just go over them. It wouldn't make any difference.
Joe, you do such an incredible job of really tapping into the depths of despair that veterans and their family members are experiencing. And as people are listening, I want you to do something that I'm doing as I'm listening, which is reach into your family system, because this is in your family system. It may be hidden, it may be pushed away. People may not want to even identify it, but this is in our epigenetics. This is in our intergenerational transmission. And what Joe is doing and what Cynde is doing by exposing all of this is making it possible for us to end the lineage of violence, whatever that may look like. And the regenerative health design that I've created encompasses the meeting between our personal stories and the way that this is also a collective story, because that's exactly what Cynde and Joe are articulating. They're talking about their family, they're talking about Joe and Cynde, and I am referencing, as they're speaking, I'm referencing my father and my brother, both veterans, both now my ancestors, whose war experiences, whose military experiences were toxic for my family system, brutal and unresolved. And it has been my job through things like the regenerative health program to see if I can create resolution personally and collectively with the family of the world. Cynde and I, as we were communicating and forming this beautiful organization that I'm so honored to be a part of, Veterans Families United, we envisioned a way that, as Cynde described, we could bring our warriors home respectfully, in a family-centered way, in a loving way, in a healing way. We created a vision of a place that could do that. And when we wrote it up and we tried to get funding for it, and we would describe it to people, and people would say, "You mean we don't have that?" Because it was just so common sense that we would have something like that, rather than warriors coming home to yet another war, the endless war of war. So I want to express enormous gratitude to Joe and to Cynde. Both of them have given their forecast of love by communicating what they've learned. So Joe has written a pamphlet published by Veterans Families United, and Cynde has also written. This is really an important book about his journey home. And this is Cynde's book, Unfiltered. These books are available through Veterans Families United. Is that correct, Cynde?
My book is available through all the avenues online, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, whatnot, Balboa Books. Joe's book is available for free on our website. You can just download it on the homepage.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I think you did a fabulous job, Stephanie, of bringing this back home to the family of mankind. It is all of our stories. It's woven deeply within all of our DNA. And the incredible thing about being alive and speaking differently and honestly and authentically is the opportunity. That's where the opportunity really begins to shift things, to create new ways of moving forward that are not as polarized, not as incongruent, not as unaligned, but are founded in our common humanity, in the heart space, and that's difficult. It's a difficult journey, but oh my goodness, I just must say, as a mother who, it's now been 20 years, you deployed 20 years ago. So in 03, and it's 2023, to watch the healing process unfold, to participate in it, as difficult as it has been at times, is the most profound testament of all the strengths and beauty of the human spirit. To not only in witnessing someone coming from the ashes, but to be a participant in rising above it. So I know it's possible. That is what we both know now.
Yeah, I would say without a shadow of a doubt, if I can endure, nearly 15 years of what I went through and come out on top, I know anybody can. It's just, I think, finding that structure and that help to walk that long, some people it's a shorter journey, but unfortunately for a lot of them, it's this very long journey filled with a lot of speed bumps and roadblocks. But as long as you just keep at it, I would stake my life on anybody being able to reach at least a level of recovery where they're kind of at an inner peace again and able to start enjoying life again. And that's something I truly questioned. Halfway through 10 years ago, I would have sat here and told you that I don't know if it can happen. I don't know if you can recover. I don't know if you can find happiness again, or even if life was worth living. And to this day, while I couldn't survive, I don't think going through it again, will say that anybody can recover as long as I think they have the right structure and system in place.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. I think that's, yes, Cynde?
I just want to say that, Stephanie, it takes people like you and organizations like Humanity Rising and all of the listeners that are courageous enough to show up and listen to this program. This is where it begins. It begins by speaking the truth and connecting hearts to heart, one to another. So I come with great gratitude for this opportunity. And even as hard as it is to say, gratitude for walking the journey, because it has, like Joe said, it has shown me that it's like Joseph Campbell's journey, the real hero's journey, the obstacles, and then the return home to all of our hearts. All of our hearts, we're all connected. And so I think we have the opportunity to begin that here.
So well said. I could not have created a better closure. Let's bring our hands together in gratitude and prayer, aligning ourselves. And thank you for your voices of truth. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Stephanie and Cynde and Joe. That was an amazing narrative of a single life's journey through war. And I think Stephanie said something very profound toward the end, that he went from one war to another war. And he had to embark on a hero's journey to go to war. There's something in the male psyche that continues to believe that war is a heroic thing. He was devastated by that, and he came home, and then he had to embark on another hero's journey to heal himself from his first hero's journey, but in a completely different way and in a new direction. And what was coming up for me is the great story of Odysseus in the Odyssey. If you remember Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, the tale of the Trojan War. Odysseus, who was king of one of the city-states, was called to join Menelaus and Achilles and Ajax and others to go fight in the Trojan War. And they spent 10 years on that hero's journey. And then the war was over through, if you recall the story, the trickery of Odysseus developing the idea of the Trojan horse that seduced the Greeks. And then he spent, for his misdeeds during his hero's journey, fighting the Trojan War, he spent 10 years under the curse of the god Poseidon, who afflicted him with every conceivable torment. Finally, having lost everything, his ships, all the sailors, the treasure, everything, he finally returns home to Penelope and his son. And there he finds more war, as the suitors had come in his absence and were trying to talk Penelope into marrying them. And there was much Sturm und Drang. And it was only at the end, in the 3 consecutive heroic endeavors, that Odysseus and Penelope were united on their wedding bed, upon which they had conceived their son so many years previously. So I was listening to Joe's story and listening to the yearning and the mourning and the deep love of his mother, I was reminded of Odysseus and how we can think we're doing the right thing and march off to war. And whatever that war is. But as it turns out, we are wounded by our inability to hold the opposites in a creative tension. And thereby we harm others and we harm ourselves. And in that wounded state, we begin to experience the retribution of the accumulation of karmic wrongs. And just when we think we have been completely scourged, a new challenge, a new demand for heroism emerges. Until finally, after all our journeys, we return to where we started and know the place for the first time. So thank you, everyone, for your consideration of these matters. Stephanie will be back tomorrow. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. You also received it in the reminders that you got from Zoom an hour before this program. Have a wonderful day. Consider deeply warriors crying for peace and the deeper meanings of the hero's journey. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.